Right, so thank you everyone for joining. So today's special guest, we have an entrepreneur that's very inspiring. We just did our French version. We're now on an English version. So Terry, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So you're at your second edition of your book, and book that we want to share that I'm showing here. Two questions: why second edition, and why mindfulness landlord?
Yeah. So the second edition, it's, funny anecdote. Like the first version of this book came out basically 6 months before COVID. And so, coming out with a book at that time, it just 2 years later felt very dated. And just to, give you an illustration of some of the things that happened, my publisher went bust through the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
So I found it that, the book was no longer available. I had to take the rights back. And then I thought, I'm not going to release the same book because it's kind of like going to be hanging out there on a cliff.
Right.
So I thought I'm going to do a major renovation, which is what I did, and then bookend it with really some information on how things have changed with COVID. And then I also have a podcast called the Mindful Wealth Podcast.
Hmm.
And it's over the last 2 years, I've been on this adventure that's like really changed my way of seeing things. And I wanted to do that justice in the book and bring maybe more sort of consciousness of what's going on in the macro and bring that down to the local level in terms of the practices we have as investors and landlords.
Your podcast, you touch on pretty much anything, or is there what's the who's watching or listening to your podcast?
Yeah. So the Mindful Wealth podcast, like basically we look at how to cultivate wealth, but in a way that is socially responsible and that helps us with our well-being as well. So really countering this idea of the rat
Well, if
race.
you make more money, usually you're happier.
Oh, you're so
Could I be a
wrong.
guest on that?
No.
I want to be a guest and shake things up. Wouldn't that be entertaining?
Well, it's actually interesting that you mentioned that because we have had happiness researchers on the show who actually will be able to tell you what percentage of your happiness is related to your material conditions. And it's 10%. Whereas 40% of your happiness score comes from these softer things like gratitude, community, connection, family.
But you're not talking about not making any money.
What do you mean about not making any money?
You're not saying that it's not a good thing to have more money and to be more successful financially. You're saying
No, she's saying that
it's important. No,
you
I
can
I
have
know.
all the money in the
Just
world, but that's not gonna it's not gonna change into
no.
the variable of being more happy. So
It
Yeah.
gives you more freedom. It gives you more options.
But I mean, all of this has been studied, right? And if you look at, like, I don't know if you're familiar with a study by Angus Deaton and Kahneman, like basically they look at this
Of
happiness
course, it
number of
was written in 1772.
1772, exactly. So that there's a happiness number. And if you end up below that salary and you're
Sure.
basically in poverty, like then that negatively affects your
Yes.
happiness. But that any amount that you make over that, it's the law of diminishing returns. So for sure, like nobody, it's not good for your happiness to be in poverty, but at a certain point, more money becomes a diminishing trade-off in relation to other things in life that might make you happier.
So I was asking to gauge like who's your listener, who's the typical person that's gonna wanna listen to your podcast,
Hmm.
and so it's someone that's looking to what to learn about property management, learn about not at all, learn about just
Yeah, well, so I mean, like, look, I have a real estate show as well, and so that's like really very the poutine of managing properties, picking
okay.
investments, that kind of thing. The Mindful Wealth podcast really came from my own desire to understand a little bit on a deeper level what we're doing when we are called like we're running after wealth. Is there wealth is having a bad moment? Like, there's a lot of negative press around wanting to make more money, around financial ambition, and so the question is, what are we doing when we want to make our bank balances bigger? How can we make sure that we're doing that in a way that's socially responsible? And so, like, that's been a super interesting
I'm sure. And then you saw the reaction
adventure.
from Jeff when I said money is good, and you right away jumped and said, "Well, no, it's not necessarily." Why? Why is that?
whoa,
Because I
you want
think
me? You want me
if
to
you
react?
make more money, you can help more people. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Well, I think you need to understand what it is as a metric, right? Like, money is a metric of something. And so, like, if you're looking at it as a way of self-actualizing. So, like, I'll give you an example. I come from a competitive sports background. I've had incredible growth in my life running after gold medals. And so by setting yourself these ambitious goals, it's like, okay, the gold medal, what is it? It's
But
a
that was a
metric.
selfish thing, though, when you look at
Yeah,
it in a certain way. And I'm not
yeah,
criticizing or
yeah.
far from it. I'm extremely competitive, and I like to win, and that's self-serving and it's selfish. But if we talk about money or success in business or ventures that where money is involved, to me, it's you're giving jobs, you're contributing to society by also being able to give more, to help more. It's we got to look
Okay.
at it that way too,
Well,
and far beyond the what is in it, what's in it for me, and the cars and the nice things.
mhm. Well, like let's try this as a thought experiment, and I would challenge you when I say that when you say that it's a pursuing medals is selfish. I think self actualization, if done in the right way, it's never selfish because as you become a better person, you're able to inspire others. You're a better person for your family. You're happier. Um,
So you win the goal or you win the medal, you fulfilled a internal need that now you can use and get to fulfill a
Giving you can give back with it,
yes,
right?
that's
And
what I'm saying.
it's
But
made
it's
you
the
a better
same in business,
person.
wouldn't you agree?
Yeah,
Because
for sure. It's
if
made you
I
become better.
can take
Yeah.
care of my needs financially, this is the real, well, one of my realization. Maybe this is unique to myself. I doubt it, but then I can think of others after because I've fulfilled my needs, and I came to the realization it's not about the material thing and the nice car and the houses and the vacations and everything else. It's got to be more than that. There's got to be more. And then the success financially after that came with, okay, well, now that I have more, can make more, it's my duty to do so because I'm capable and I can help more people. You see?
Well, I mean, look, philanthropy is
So we're
one.
saying the same thing.
No, I'm not sure we are. Like, I'm not sure we are. Like, look, I mean, philanthropy is one thing, right? And like, this argument that, like, let's say, if I'm, Bill Gates, right? Like, I can have this
Yes.
philanthropic project, and like, I'm obviously not going to argue with that. That's true. But in the way that we do business, and I think, look, I come from a world of investment real estate. Like the landlord and landlording practices, investment real estate can be practiced in ways that are socially destructive. And
It can.
it can. And I think that one needs
I
to be
agree.
aware that, like, even if you're trying to get these stacks of money to give back to the poor, if your business practices are,
But if I'm an investor and I
yeah,
take care of my properties and I provide great environments for families and people in need, and I make money and they are happier
Yeah,
and I can
I
give
see the
more.
reaction, and I kind of agree with Terry because
No,
this is kind of
but did
the
you hear what I said
no,
though?
because I
Because
already know what
if
you're gonna
I'm one
say.
of those landlords,
well, so listen, basically,
and may I
statistics,
ask,
yeah,
may
yeah,
I add, I
yeah,
should say
yeah.
something else.
Yeah,
If I get bigger, then I'll need more people, and then now I'm providing jobs. And if you look in this room, where four, five, six, seven people, where they wouldn't be here, they wouldn't have a job. It's an environment that you create with the success and with the growth of your,
Mhm.
if you're capable of it,
But
is my
it's
opinion.
more complicated than that. And I think if
Is
you,
it though?
yes, it is. No, it 100% is.
Is
Like
it?
if you look at just the Montreal market with what's happening with development, okay? Basically, I don't know if you've read the latest CMHC report, but there's a real
I make it a
affordable,
point to
yeah,
every night read a chapter.
there you go. So that you know that there's a huge crisis in affordable housing.
Yes.
Okay. And if you're creating new condo units, basically, or doing gentrification, like you need to
Yeah.
be aware that if by getting rid of some of those affordable units, it means that now 20%, the bottom 20% of earners are competing for only 10% of units that are left for them. And so that's an issue, right? And when you're deciding what to do, like let's say I work in the lower spectrum of the market. And so like now as I'm making my projection of what I want to do, there's, an affordable housing mortgage that's available and I really want to be aware of what are the macro questions because if my way to get stacks so that I can be Bill Gates and do philanthropy involves something that's socially destructive, maybe I should be mindful of it
Right.
and not and think
Oh
about what
no,
I'm
I
doing.
fully agree. Fully
Yeah.
agree. So
Yeah.
it makes for a very exciting,
Yeah.
fun podcast. Where can we listen to the podcast? On
um
Spotify.
yeah, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Mindful Wealth podcast. Yeah.
Stephen, let's put down below the link for Terry's podcast. That'd be great, as well as the book that we're discussing. And we kind of veered off here, but
Yeah.
it's always interesting. Tina, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, we have many questions. First of all, Steve Tucker on LinkedIn says, totally agree with. It's not selfish at all. What about the inspiration that winning and being successful does for other people?
Exactly.
Absolutely, but that's exactly self-actualization, right? And I mean, if you look at what makes us grow as human beings, what makes us better people, well, it has to do with stretching. and you stretch when you have these, external metrics, the gold medals, the X number of dollars that you want to have in your bank account. So it's not true to say that pursuing those things is like somehow selfish and bad. It's in how you do it. And if you're doing it in a growth sense, as opposed to a winner take all mentality where you just want to step on people to get to the top, right?
Yeah.
It's the same activity, but animated by a very different
Well, you got to be
ethos.
conscious about it. You
Absolutely.
have to understand.
Mindful.
It all comes back to mindfulness.
I'm reading this book now. Excuse me, Tina. We'll get to the question, but it's about the mindset of what's it called? Growth. What's it called?
Carol Dweck, Fixed Growth Mindset.
No,
Isn't
Well-
it just mindset?
I think it's called mindset.
Mindset,
Anyways,
yeah.
they're talking about fixed types of mindset and
growth mindset.
but probably maybe the
It's
same.
Carol
author.
Dweck. Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it?
for sure. Yeah.
So very interesting. So similar to what you were just saying. Go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, so Steve Packer says also that meaning setting goals and being successful shows others who are struggling that it's possible.
That's true.
And he has a question for Terry. Do you think the government will impose measures that will cap the investors as to how many units they can have or own as per the housing crisis?
Well, I certainly hope not. I didn't hear about that, but did you hear anything about that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, they did this ban on, foreign buyers for the next amount of time. I think that's going to affect actually like nobody, because any foreign company that like a major financial player
Yeah.
will just, incorporate a company in Canada. So I think I think it's a very populist move, to be honest, because
Yeah.
I think that the people
But-
it affects is very small.
And has that passed though, or this is just a proposed?
I'm going to expose my ignorance and say I don't know, but
I don't think it has
yeah.
passed, according to my.
I don't think so.
But no, I don't think that
But
the
again, I
government's
don't
going to limit the number of units, because when you think, like you say, that 50% of the units in Montreal are owned by major financial players who own thousands of units, like there's no way you can cap that.
Yeah, it becomes a bit communist here in a way. So thank you, Stephen, for that question and comment. Jeff, if you want
Quickly, when we'll get back to the topics, very interesting. Terry, we're just gonna take few seconds to talk about our Crown project. So exclusive Metal Group is now in new construction. So exclusive project to all our real estate brokers and members. Go ahead, Stephen. We're working on it.
So we're back with Terry, author of a fantastic book that I had a chance to read the first edition. I'm going to read the second edition now. You're a mother. You're a realtor. You're a podcast creator. Is that the word?
Podcaster.
Podcaster. You're really busy.
Yes.
Are you still into the sports thing
Yeah,
too? Or
yeah.
You teach? Or
Yeah, I
you-
teach.
Oh my
Yeah, I
God.
run the women's program in my gym.
So someone out there wanting to work with you on any of these different projects that you have, how would they go about communicating with you? Could they just go to one place, Google your name?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way, I'm on all social media under Terrie Schauer, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So I think if you want to know what I'm up to, that's kind of the easiest way.
Or you can reach out to us and we'll
Yeah.
Put you in contact.
we
But
can-
I have a question. So Etienne mentioned it very, very clearly. You're a mother, you're an entrepreneur, you're a realtor, you're very involved in your community. You're very mindful, obviously, by doing and in the conversation we have. How do you manage all those? Yeah. How do you manage it all?
by
Yeah.
being in the moment.
No, I mean, it's a little bit more contrived than that. I think, Etienne, in the French version, he kind of poked a little bit at this idea of like, is it really a 50-50 balance, right? Is
Yeah.
work-life balance really about 50-50? And I think that it's not. I think it's about being mindful of the trade-offs that you make, and that in different moments of your life, you can prioritize different things. So
let me ask
Yeah.
you then, right now, what's the emphasis on? Where are you putting a bit more of your energy?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm at this point trying to promote the book and grow the podcast because I think that's really, where my interest is right now professionally. I think I also, made a commitment to spend more time with my son because I felt like some of that was getting a little bit out of control. And so I'm, making an effort to finish work earlier and spend more time in wearing my mom hat.
And why would you want to sell the book? Why
Sorry.
did you write the book? Did you write it for yourself? Because I'm no, I'm
Good
not
question.
being
Good
funny here
question. Good
or
question.
sarcastic or anything. Because a lot of people that write books, they write it for them. It's a weird thing to say, but I like to read biographies and all that, and or books about different topics of. But oftentimes, I've heard this from authors. They write it for them to better understand what they're doing or where they're going, and then they share it. But it wasn't because they wanted to write to people necessarily. I'm
Mhm.
curious to see for you
Well,
what
I
the
mean, like,
motivation was.
no, I mean, I'm kind of evangelical about these ideas, right? Like, I always wanted to write a book. I enjoy the written word, but at the same time, like for me, especially these like warrior mindset, like the gains that we can get from optimizing our mindset and the potential like to do a little bit of good, and I think that really like this idea of connection, and when you become mindful, you just become more connected to yourself, to the outside world, to understanding the repercussions of your actions. And, when we look around in the world today, there's just not enough of that. And I think that if we can introduce it even into a real estate discussion, it seems like it's really a bit off topic, but I disagree. I think that the more we import those ideas into everything we do, the more good we can do in the world.
That's beautiful. And have you thought of doing a audio version of the book?
I would love to.
Because that's I
Let's
think
make it happen. You should
more and
make it
more
happen.
popular.
Yeah.
If you want, I'll do it. You know, I can use
I think I prefer Terrie's
a DJ
voice
voice.
versus
Oh,
yours.
goodness.
when I was a young girl.
Oh,
I
goodness. Wow, this went sideways fast.
yeah, maybe not. I think
So
you
we'll
have-
take that snippet
Yeah,
and play around with
maybe.
it.
I think that you had someone
Yeah,
else.
so Steve Tiger says the reason I asked you that question was concerning last week's CTV News reported the percentage of revenue residential units growing at an alarming rate. That's really the direction I was going for, meaning it's squeezing out the lower income earners. But thanks for answering my question.
Well, that's what you were saying.
Yep.
That's what you were talking about a bit earlier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have another question from Steve. He says, "What are your views on the investors versus actual owners and the crisis in Canada? Meaning, do you see this becoming a problem?"
Well, I think it's already a problem. I think
Yeah.
if you look at home ownership, like I think, this is a very big topic, right? I think like, for example, with the CMHC, their strategy in the last 30 years has been to try to support society by making home ownership a possibility for people. And that and the COVID crisis has driven us into this like crazy affordability issue now. And I think that you're seeing the CMHC pivot now more towards multifamily and supporting affordable housing for people who are locked out of the home ownership market. So, I mean, like for sure, I think it's a vast question, but it's very topical.
Let me ask you this, and maybe this is a question that I shouldn't ask, but what if there was less of a régie du logement kind of scenario? Wouldn't that help people to be more creative, and maybe it would help a lot more?
So,
Or do you think the opposite?
no,
that-
I mean this is very interesting. So I think like let's not confuse everything. The régie as a way of solving tenant disputes, actually, I think it's kind of good because it allows people to represent themselves without messy lawyers. Rent control, which I think is where you're going, and if
Yes.
you look at the effects of rent control, it actually has the opposite effect. And I've read a lot of studies on this, but what happens in rent control markets is that affordability goes down.
Because and that's I'm happy you said that because when you study states like in the south of I don't know South Carolina or Georgia and all that, they don't have rent control. I'm curious to if ever you've done this work or this research as to well how do they handle that? Like we all
Well,
everywhere there's people that are struggling with
Well, they let the market sort things out, right? And like, so basically, and then there will be the government comes in with tax breaks and sort of market things. And this is like a typical problem in economics, right? Like either you have market controls, price controls, which is kind of a communist socialist tool
yeah
that ends up having a negative effect on supply, or else you do it with incentives. So tax incentives, what the CMHC is doing right now with affordable mortgages. And like, it's no secret which side of that debate I fall on. I think that you have to work on the supply side, by making it attractive for investors to invest in affordable housing and then allow the market to set the price of that. Because, like, I mean, I could go on about this, but studies of rent control have really revealed that it depreciates housing stock because people don't invest, and that it actually diminishes the supply. And you could look in Montreal, like, we're losing affordable units at an incredible rate in Montreal. Why? Because nobody wants to run affordable housing, because it's
Yeah.
capped at a ridiculously low rate, and so people don't maintain things properly. Like, I could really go on.
And this was
Um,
rent control was established a long time ago, no, and hasn't been adjusted or like I don't remember. I'm not. You're the expert here, but I had read that this was something that had passed in the 70s or 80s or.
so, I don't exactly know. I think there was basically 2 points at which rent controls came in. One was after the Second World War, and the other was then in the 70s. I
Yeah.
think Quebec's rent control has been around since after the Second World War. It's been in there
Oh
for
yeah.
a
Okay.
very long time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Tina.
Yeah. So Steve is saying, I think society is squeezing out the middle class person family altogether.
Yeah. Well, I agree on that. I think there's a squeeze for sure on. I think what he means to say, and what I is that it just doesn't exist anymore. This dream of the middle class. It's either you're very successful and
Steve, go listen to the Mindful Wealth podcast. This
there
season,
you
no,
go.
I'm serious. This season is about like the economists giving you their precise opinion of what's going on. And so, like, some of the economic shifts that have been happening, let's say over the last 20 years, financialization of housing markets, financialization of the stock market, and like basically what's going on, it's true. The middle class has been squeezed in a certain way. And if you want to understand maybe like exactly what's going on behind that, and maybe some policies that governments could enact to counter it, but rent control is not the answer as far as I'm concerned.
We have one more question from Annunciata. She's asking, what advice would you give to new brokers who are currently struggling with social anxiety and want to make new connections? Because you said you were like suffering from it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a very personal question, because when I started out, like, I really did suffer from social anxiety and shyness, right? Like, I believed that I was so shy that I would never succeed in what I was doing. And, for me, part of it was building that foundation. I used, this mental training method of the Warrior's Way. And then that, because anxiety is like a lion, okay? And if you don't sleep, it goes up, your baseline goes down. You don't eat properly, baseline goes down. You don't enjoy community connections, baseline goes up. And then every little spike over that becomes something unmanageable. So if you work on lowering the bar with all of these things that we know, you make a lifestyle that makes you less anxious, and you get the tools to like work on your mindset, then you're able to manage those particular moments. And to give you like a very precise personal thing, like, for me, it was just a question of like learning to sit with the discomfort. Like, just because you feel anxious doesn't mean you need to run for the door. You can
Yeah.
just sit there and feel anxious and get what you want out of the social interaction, but you have to be willing to sit with feeling uncomfortable.
You gotta accept it. And I think that everybody's got some level of it. Like I was the shyest person on earth, and I had anxiety and all that. I think my anxiety came from the feeling of not being in control, not doing what I really wanted to do. Putting that, hiding it somewhere. So I think it's important to listen to that little voice of what should you be doing, so that I think it helps with anxiety, because anxiety, I think, again, it goes back, it's all about the feeling of lack of control. So I think you said it best, is to accept it, and to accept that I think most people have it
Yeah.
some way. And there's some less severe. There's panic attacks and all that. I've lived through all that.
Yeah.
It's
But it doesn't mean anything. Like, I think we identify with our emotional ups and downs, but they don't actually say anything about you, right?
Mm.
Like, it's just a feeling that you're having now. And if you can sit through whatever it is, it doesn't have to define you.
No,
It's just
exactly.
like a weather system that comes through.
Well said.
It
Jeff,
is well said.
I see
Uh,
you nodding,
no, because I
wanting
was
to
I'm
express
gonna
feelings.
keep that my next question when we're gonna come to your podcasts and keep talking about mindfulness and all, because we're heading to the end of this interview. Terry, I want to say thank
Wait,
you.
my
Yes.
wife, just before
Well,
we
go
go,
ahead.
because
Go ahead.
it's my wife,
Yes,
Of course.
she's saying advice for new moms who left the work field and have anxiety returning to the work field?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think unfortunately I'm going to be boring and, give back the same answer, right? Like dealing with anxiety, you need to lower the level in general. So sleep, go to the gym, do things that you know are good for you. That's the first
Take
thing.
care of your husband.
Focus
sure
Are we,
he's
are we, are
focus
we
on
live? Can we
yourself.
cut?
Focus a little bit on yourself, and no, and accept that discomfort is part of it, right? Like everybody goes through these phases where it's the unknown and you need to stretch into it, and you don't need to feel like that anxiety defines you. Just sit with it, push through it, and see what's on the other side.
So again, if you want a copy of the book, we're going to be doing we're going to be
A draw.
doing a draw. Comment mindfulness or landlord, mindful. What's the title?
Mindful landlord.
Mindful landlord, and we'll be Terrie will be signing it to personally. We can reach you through all social media platforms if people want to work with you as a broker, finding anything.
I don't actually do that much brokering anymore. I still have my license.
Maybe you will now, but get a copy.
Yeah.
Give it as a gift. It's a very unique book. Like I said, I read a lot, and this was something
Yeah.
that I never came across. So I love the fact that you joined the two things together.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
I
Go ahead.
would love feedback. If you have anything to say about this particular interview, you want to shoot me a message, or if you read the book and have some, something to say about it, private message me, post a review on Amazon. I really do want to know what's the experience of that and how can I make my ideas better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terrie. And to close off, we're going to talk about our contest. So go ahead, Steven, and I'll explain it to. We'll see you everyone tomorrow.
You want to win $10,000 worth of Apple products? It's simple. Stay tuned for the 100th episode of The Growth Show. For every like, share, comment, and subscription, you get an extra entry to our contest.